Good afternoon. This is Chris Riley with System Source. Thanks so much for taking the lunchtime of your day today to spend with us to learn about VM's recent changes and kind of what you can do about them, what your alternatives are for those. And so we'll start looking into those in just a moment. So we'll get the deck right up there. So I'm joined today by Scott Rippey, who's a solutions architect with System Source. Many of you know Scott, as well as many of you also know Dave Ferg, one of our senior consultants. And so we'll be going through what are some of those changes today. What are some of the changes, looking at the agenda. So Broadcom has introduced changes last year. They also introduced changes this year, and they're pretty big. So we want to make sure that you kind of understand the ramifications of them, what's driving those various changes, how they affect pricing, and other aspects as we kind of go through the agenda. In the second part of the agenda, we'll also talk about, well, what are some of the alternatives that you could consider if you weren't doing VMware? And so one of the things that we looked at last year with some of the changes is that the price changes often weren't large enough to kind of pay for doing an alternative, to really look at those. But with the changes this year, financially, they may drive a very different decision making, and so that's why we wanted to kind of talk about those things, whereas last year we didn't really talk about alternatives. People just kind of paid a little bit more, but now it's a lot more. So we'll go into the details on those, and then we'll also have Q&A at the end. So a few housekeeping things as we get started. First of all, we hope you're enjoying that pizza. If you asked for a pizza when you registered, if not, note Julie Dellinger's email address on the screen. If it hasn't arrived here in the next few minutes, they may be trying to find your office, find your home if you're working from home. But Julie can try to help you out with any pizza dilemmas. During the webinar today, the audio is in presentation mode, so you'll be able to hear each of us as we present. But sadly, we can't hear you, but we do that so that any noise or music on hold or those types of things that may be where a participant is doesn't come through the whole group. However, you can reach me at any point during today's session right through the chat tab and go to webinar, just share whatever feedback that you might have there. But also we ask that you put your questions into the questions tab. We'll do Q&A at the end. My guess is there'll probably be questions on this one. Also, if you put it in writing and we can't get to it during the session, we can hit it after the session as well, or if it's particular or very deep or very kind of company specific. This presentation is being recorded and will also be sent to you as a PDF for the deck. You'll get that this afternoon. And then finally, there is a short evaluation you'll get after the session today. It takes literally about a minute or so to do it. If you can let us know how we did, and also gives several options for things that might be helpful resources after the fact, and you can let us know what resources it might be helpful to you. And we'll try to make it a little bit more fun. We'll take some of the completed evaluations, do a drawing, and the lucky person gets an Amazon $50 gift card, the gift that always seems to fit. So just a little bit about System Source for those that may be new to us. So we've been around since 1983. There's about 70 of System Source, and we work with IT professionals from South Central Pennsylvania all the way down through Central Maryland and into the Washington, D.C. area. And while we do work on the end user computing side, most of our work is happening in the data center. Probably 80–90% of our work is happening right there in that data center. And whether that's the traditional on-prem data center, which we may focus on more at least for the first half of today's session, that traditional data center of all the storage and virtualization and servers and networking, all of those types of things that make the modern data center work, including security, of course. We also are working over on the cloud side, so heavy work in Microsoft Azure, Amazon Web Services, as also all the places that you could also place your data center resources like servers and storage, etc., like platform as a service. There could be hosting centers, colo centers, etc. So regardless of where you put it, we kind of look for kind of designing solutions, installing, supporting solutions across the data center environment, regardless of where those live. And in fact, many of our clients have resources in all of those locations. folks are acquiring technology because they want to improve. So one of the areas could be all the data center related things like Azure or VMware, but also we're doing things like in training. So there's probably 600 to 1,000 courses at any one point on our training schedule, including things on Azure and VMware and security, as well as several dozen others, right? And we'll have some kind of specific things later on that, as well as Present, which is professional AV. So all those Teams rooms, Zoom rooms, WebEx rooms, all the monitors and projectors and microphones, speakers, et cetera, that go in all the way from design through installation. And finally, we maintain all these things either on a reactive basis, you call us when you need help under service and support, or on a proactive basis under managed services. There's also a bunch of events coming up. I'll drop these links into the chat as well, and these are clickable links once you get the deck later on. On next Thursday, we have a session that's on Microsoft Azure infrastructure. And then on the 13th, we'll be looking at daily practices to secure your IT. A lot of times we look at the pieces, but how do we kind of put them together? We'll look at that on the 13th. On the 14th, we'll be looking at some Power BI. On the 15th, this is an in-person event on the 15th, and that's going to be pickleball up in Hunt Valley, as well as a kind of a free sunglass kind of offer. So you can click on that and get some additional details. But if you're a pickleball player or just wondering what it's all about, that you may enjoy that event. No presentations, no PowerPoints. How about that? And then finally, on the 21st, we're going to be looking at some cyber insurance claims piece. And really, what can you do to try to make sure that if you have a claim, it gets paid, as well as how do you minimize the premiums up to that point? And a lot of folks also forget to say, what if I make a claim and then how do I minimize my premiums thereafter, after I've had to make a claim? We'll look into that on the 21st. With that, let me go ahead and hand the reins over to Scott, please.
Thanks, Chris. Welcome, everyone. Appreciate you taking the time out to attend our webinar here. We are going to be, of course, talking about VMware, the Broadcom acquisition, what to expect next. First of all, I'm going to kind of review what changed. A lot of this is you'll already know because this is about coming up on a year and a half old after Broadcom's acquisition of VMware. What did they do differently? They did a lot differently, but the key bullets were transitioning from perpetual licenses with the annual SNS that you're used to paying to a pure subscription model. And those subscriptions are based on CPU cores as opposed to what used to be based on sockets in the host servers. So, yeah, typically most of our customers have 2 socket servers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 10, 20, whatever. Usually 2 CPUs, and you would pay by socket. Now, Broadcom is counting your cores and charging accordingly. The one thing on the positive side, vCenter is now included in your vSphere subscriptions, so there's no separate line item for that anymore. And you can use multiple vCenters. So if you've got a primary data center and a DR data center, you've already got 2 vCenters. That's all included in the subscription. You don't need to buy it anymore. And the support is included in your subscription now. It's 7x24. They don't have the 8x5 option anymore. So that's in a nutshell what changed from a licensing standpoint. Now, in terms of the actual additions that are being offered, did I just mess up my sharing? Here we go. Sorry about that. I'm not sure this is still coming through the same way for everybody. I'm trying to my slides to advance just a second. There we go. So on the left is what you are used to buying prior to the Broadcom acquisition. So those two Essentials editions were absolutely essential for small, medium businesses that that really didn't have those enterprise requirements. We sold tons of that. In addition, there was vSphere Standard, which has been around forever, that just allowed for larger environments than simply 3 hosts, which is where the Essentials edition stopped, and then Enterprise Plus for customers that really had a need for a lot of the advanced functionality of vSphere. Going forward now, we've got Standard as the low end, so Essentials is gone. Enterprise Plus is still available. They had whacked that initially, but then brought it back. And then we've got the advanced editions now, VVF and VCF, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, just briefly to let you know what those editions even are. But this is what is being offered today by Broadcom on the vSphere side. Filled in a few of these blocks with the pricing that kind of makes sense if you're going from the left side to the right. So if you're an Essentials or Essentials Plus customer, you would naturally migrate to Standard, and that's the new price. I'll give that some context in a minute. And if you were Enterprise Plus, you would naturally migrate to Enterprise Plus, or one of the higher editions, and you see the pricing there. But again, I'll give that some context in a second. So what is VVF, otherwise known as Foundation? It is Enterprise Plus, which you see there in A, B, and C. So vSAN, if you're a vSAN customer, you've got some vSAN eligibility there, up to 100 gigs. You can buy more. And then some of the vRealize stuff, which was rebranded as ARIA, and then Kubernetes. If none of that means anything to you because you're not using it, which is 99% of our customers, VVF didn't really buy you anything over and above Enterprise Plus. Moving up the stack even further, the Cloud Foundation, again, Enterprise Plus, and then the list of additional functionality. As you go down that list, might be interesting, might be things you're already using, which is great. Cloud Foundation is probably good for you, but if you've either never heard of it or would never use it because you just don't have an enterprise kind of environment that uses, say, NSX, it's not really buying you anything new. So the licensing rules, because it's not as simple as count your cores and pay for your cores. There is a requirement for a routine to get run. It's easy, but VMware wants to see the output of this routine that actually goes out and count your cores. A new requirement this year is a minimum buy of 72 cores, which I'm gonna show is not very friendly to customers that have very small numbers of hosts, but that is a requirement, and they will not quote anything less than 72 cores. And a carryover requirement is a minimum of 16 cores per CPU, which again is kind of unfortunate, because there are a lot of you out there that have 8-core CPUs. Why? Because it made a lot of sense if you have a 2-socket system to have 16 cores total, which fits nicely into your Microsoft licensing, because when you're licensing Windows Server, you're buying a 16-core license most often. And you didn't have to worry about buying extra Microsoft cores if you have a 16-core server total. But Broadcom's now charging you 16 cores per socket minimum. So I thought, if we went through some examples here just to understand the impact, and I'm starting with, and this is purely an example, medium-sized company, you've got 5 hosts, shared storage, maybe somewhere in the vicinity of 60 total VMs, although that's not important in this calculation. You're not charged by VM. Each host has, in this example, 16 cores, and in the past, you had used Enterprise Plus, renewing at that $1976 per host per year, or almost $10,000 a year. That's what you were paying. Now, you count up those cores, it's 160. You've got $176 per core. So your next annual renewal would be $28,000. So almost 3x. It's not actually quite that bad because you're not renewing the center. That's included, but nonetheless, pretty big price increase versus what you were paying. Let's see, you've probably already gone through this once if you're doing annual renewals. If you were lucky enough to do a 3-year renewal in the last 3 years, you're probably just coming up on this for the first time. Next example, somewhat smaller company, 3 hosts, maybe around 30 VMs. You've got, again, 2 16-core CPUs. In the past, you were buying Enterprise Plus Edition, Essentials Plus Edition, because that covered, in a shared storage environment, up to 3 hosts. Very affordable, and that would renew it at $900 a year. Fast forward to where we are today, number of CPUs, cores, all shown there, and we're looking at 5,600. So, wow, what a big jump, 6x for this particular environment, and we've been seeing a lot of this. And then one last example for maybe the smallest of small, but we've got quite a few clients out there that are in this boat as well. Maybe 2 VMware hosts, you're not sharing storage, they're just dedicated hosts, just a few VMs, 2 8-core CPUs. Formerly, you used the Essentials Edition, not the Essentials Plus, the Essentials, which is really designed for the smallest of small customers, renewing it a paltry $70 a year. Go through all the calculations, and now, even though you calculate out the 64 cores, you've got that 72 core minimum, and the prices for an annual upgrade here, renewal here, 3,700 versus 70, just a massive increase. And I wish there wasn't a better solution here, and it's just indicative of what VMware is doing, and really what VMware is not doing for the small business anymore. It's kind of a shame. So, I've been kind of the point person here at System Source, working with Broadcom, understanding what is changing, what's going on, and for the most part, being the bearer of bad news, in terms of renewing customers like you. But just some of the things that have clearly changed, and some of the rumors going on that I do believe have some validity just based on Broadcom's behavior. What is clear and in writing You'll find this on various websites, but there is that 72 core minimum, the 16 cores per CPU, and the Essentials editions just not being offered anymore at all. Some other things that are clear but not in writing, but it's really just based on behavior and based on conversations with various Broadcom reps. They're not allowing any downgrades in terms of editions. If you're running, say, Enterprise Plus today, and you're saying, with these price increases, I really want to downgrade to standard. I know I'm going to lose some functionality, but I can get by with standard. They're not going to let you do it anymore. They did that last year. They would allow that. Now, no more. Your core counts can't even be downgraded, which is a kind of a head scratcher, because if you're really being diligent about optimizing your environment, maybe really trying to look at your core count and can I do things like removing excess capacity because I've moved half my environment to the cloud, say. That's great, but your VMware renewals are not going to reflect any of that, which again, kind of a shame. Now, Broadcom is also starting to force upgrades to editions that they want to sell you, not editions that you need necessarily. So their flagship editions are that VVF and VCF, and that is the direction they're going. I do believe that Standard Edition and Enterprise Plus Edition are going to go away just like the Essentials editions did. Again, just kind of abandoning the small medium business. I've put that down there in that rumored. That has not been announced in any way. I can't get anybody to admit this, but I do believe the Standard and Enterprise Plus will be discontinued in the near future. So this is a busy slide, and I don't want to read it to you. I reached out to our partner rep at Broadcom to just really try to get my hands around all of what I just described in terms of behavior. What's true, what's rumor. Didn't really get a straight answer. It wasn't a big surprise, but I did put that answer exactly as it was given back to me and thought it was very telling. It's really all about what Broadcom believes are in your best interest, not what you believe is in your best interest. And I just thought that this really highlighted where Broadcom's head is in terms of what's important to them and not really caring so much about what's important to you. Toward the end there, we're hoping our partners understand our strategy related to their business. Many of our customers will be having ongoing discussions about their infrastructure, allowing this growth path to be facilitated by the partner. For now, this will continue. And that last line reminded me of a meme that you've probably seen before. The beatings will stop when morale improves. That's kind of how I read that. So going forward with VMware, this is where it gets tough, because everybody's mad at Broadcom. It's hard to argue, though, at the end of the day, that VMware is still the premier hypervisor on the market. It's been around the longest. It's pretty darn rock solid, supports the most guest OSs, and it's a difficult decision to stick with a partner that's not treating you very well or just biting the bullet. And we understand that. The cost to migrate to another hypervisor, especially if you're not combining it with a hardware refresh, is not insignificant. It's, there are a lot of considerations, and in a lot of ways, if you are kind of running at full capacity in your VMware environment, you really need additional hardware in order to make the migration, because there's no in-place migration from VMware to something else. So at least on-prem. Leads to that third bullet there. At best, it is easiest to migrate with a hardware refresh. There are good tools from a migration standpoint out there, and if you have a hardware refresh coming up, migrating from VMware to something else is easiest at that time. So how can we help? We have some tools where we can analyze your hosts and identify some over provisioning, and try to retire unneeded hosts if necessary. What that had a lot of merit last year, a little less merit now, that they're really not caring if your environment shrinks. You're going to have to pay what you paid last year. One thing I've been doing, and this has been a little difficult, just again from the standpoint of Broadcom being difficult to deal with. But if you consider a 3-year renewal, it will lock in your pricing today and your addition today. So if standard were to go away, 3-year renewal of standard will get you out 3 years at least at standard and lock in. And they are offering, and this is new this year, annually paid 3-year renewals. So you don't have to buy those 3 years up front. You can buy them 1 year at a time. And if you plan to stay with VMware, I do recommend this. We bit off a big chunk of additional funds that were required last year. I thought that the pain was over. I thought last year, we were done. And once we kind of absorbed the pain of that transition from VMware to Broadcom and the going to a subscription model, I thought we were done. And yet this year, it's just ratcheting up more. And so strongly recommend considering a 3-year paid annual contract. And with that, I am going to turn this over to Dave, and let's start talking about some alternatives.
Well, thank you, Scott. I'm waiting to get control of the slides here, and all right, so you should see my deck now. Okay, so my role in this webinar is to talk about some of the alternatives that Scott has just mentioned. And I'm going to take the approach of talking about two things. There's a lot of hypervisors out there that we could talk about, and it will just start becoming mind-numbingly confusing if we just start doing a matrix of who's out there. So I'm going to be talking about cloud, and I'm going to be talking about Hyper-V. Understand that we're willing to talk to you about these migrations and what's best for you and all of that. Right now, I'm just going to be presenting some things that may help get you starting to think along those lines. So let's see if I can get the slide to move. There we go. All right. So why you might want to consider the cloud. And when I'm talking about the cloud, one of the decision factors that you're going to have if you're starting down that path is more than just replacing a hypervisor. Yes, you can take your VMs as they are and move them up to an Azure platform, for instance, and let them be another hypervisor for you. But the cloud is offering more things that make it an attractive platform for you for your business. So why the cloud? Well, the cloud, right now we're in a world where automation is becoming almost necessary to even keep up with business requirements, with competitors and things like that. AI being a hot topic today of interest. And it is right now, it's currently in a relatively early stage of adoption. but you need to start considering where it can help your business, where it becomes a necessity in your business, how you would implement it, what it would cost, all of those things. Step one to even starting down these ideas of automating and using AI would to get yourself onto an infrastructure that is built to take advantage of these new technologies. And the cloud is being built around these new technologies as the competitive advantage they want to offer you to entice you to move your systems up there. The cloud is being built for this. It's being built for rapid deployment, rapid changes, replication globally if necessary, so that you can reach out to where your customers are now and react quickly, because I can deploy quickly. I can use the AI built-in features for not only monitoring, but for deploying. I don't have to deal with as much integration as I would on-prem. Yes, there is some integration you need to do when you fire up a service, but many times it's just firing up a service and you have something available without having to plan the full integration of it. So you can move quicker and respond quicker. It also lets the smaller and mid-sized businesses take advantage of and leverage what only the largest companies can afford to do on their own. So a big company is building big technologies, and you buy your pieces of it, and you can take care of the same. You can use the same technologies and the same strategies as some of the big guys, even though you're not able to build something like this. You're just, because you're only having to use what's there. So what are your options? You clearly have infrastructure as a service when you move to the cloud. And this is kind of the apples to apples with any hypervisor, be it VMware or Hyper-V or whatever. This is your VMs, your storage, networking, all of those things. They're just up in the cloud. So this is where you would go if you're just trying to go like for like in moving up to the cloud. But in the cloud, you can now start to take advantage of things that are more platform as a service. If you have Windows servers running SQL, you could now, if you wanted, move to just SQL services, and you're not managing the servers up underneath. You do get to define the processing power you want there, but you don't have to manage them. So this would be SQL, Azure Files, Logic Apps, other things like that. And of course, we're all familiar by now with Office 365, this software as a service app. Because the Entra ID directory is behind a lot of what goes on up in the Azure world, there is a natural integration between the SaaS apps and the infrastructure as a service, and that they will trust the same accounts coming from the same Entra ID, and we can build a lot of integration there. To be honest, the Office 365 migration era is kind of behind us. A lot of people have already made that move. And now that we're talking to these same customers again, that has not naturally led them to be looking at the infrastructure of the service or the platform as a service because of this integration. So you would just naturally get that when you start thinking about using the cloud. All right. The other thing to consider is it is a large, highly redundant, replicated network. So most of us don't have 300 data centers or more, supporting us in various regions. Azure is built that way, and it's built so that you can replicate your data across regions, across data centers. Yeah, you may have to pay for the use of that. It's not like it's free, but it's there to use. Sometimes at a click of a mouse, and you can start setting up these replications for you. So that this big network that's available to you, that is highly available as well, built in a very fault-tolerant manner, becomes your data center, and it becomes very flexible about where your data may want to be. So some of the things you might want to consider with Azure. Moving to the cloud, it becomes an operation expense. You're going to pay annually, monthly, whatever your contract is here. And instead of buying hardware and having it depreciate over time and then having you go through refresh cycles, you're just going to continually pay for your usage up in Azure and get the same resources. So the idea of this hardware refresh can fade over time. Will this be a savings in cost? The true answer to that is maybe. There's not always a savings moving to the cloud, though there seems to always be some step up in your high availability and your fault tolerances. So you do get something, even if you're not saving dollars, you're getting more for the dollars you are spending typically. Azure is built on the latest and up-to-date technology. So when you want to deploy something, especially in the platform as a service world, you're getting the latest, greatest. You're not having to upgrade that. Microsoft, as almost all vendors now, are building to the cloud first and are building more toward a cloud strategy. A lot of applications are moving into a software as a service solution because it's easier for them and where they can keep it updated. And it thus becomes easier for you because you then now get to focus on the applications and the data management, not as much of the infrastructure management as you had before. All right, so this is where they're building first. So if something new is going to come out, it's going to come out in the cloud first before it comes down to any on-prem solutions. Azure is a geographically wide network. It, regions here in the East US, Midwest, Far West, UK, all over the place. It has integrations with your on-prem. So you're not having to go to the deep end of the pool and just jump and say, today I'm on-prem and tomorrow I'm in the cloud. We integrate. We build this with VPN connections using gateways and things like that. And we can move things piecemeal at a time, just kind of extending your data center to a second location and make the migration gradual, leaving things on-prem that may need to stay on-prem and moving to the cloud things that make sense to move to the cloud, reducing your data center footprint. It's flexible. HA, DR, many of that is just a few clicks away and it's ready for you to use. Again, you'll pay because maybe you're doubling your storage use, but it's there to just turn on and start replicating. I can build systems, and we'll have a slide on this in a minute here, that dynamically scale up and down as demand requires. So those things are available for you to select as you're deploying software, which always helps you with client performance, your speed to get to the market with things, etc. And of course, security. We're doing a lot of other webinars on security right now in Azure. Azure is a very robust security platform. It is very transparent of where your security is. It will tell you, here's what I'm seeing as your security footprint today. Here's recommendations we will make. So you're not left in the dark. Microsoft is telling you what some recommendations would be to improve your security. So, you have the Defender software, you have key vaults for holding your keys, you have role-based access controls, all of these things up here. And we do plenty of webinars on building the security. Our next one coming up this month is on the infrastructure security. We just did one on identities. We're going to do one on infrastructure. We're going to do another one shortly after on storage securities and encryptions. And then we're going to go back to identities to talk about all the things we couldn't cover in the first session. So you possibly are moving to a more secure environment, moving up to Azure. Or let's put it this way, you're moving to an environment that offers you more security options than where you are today. It's a resilient system. There are services that are what's called zonal. They live in a data center. Think about like a VM, all right? It lives in a data center within a zone. But you can replicate that across multiple data centers within the zone so that if a data center fails, you still have your systems on other data centers. You can then also replicate that to another region. So all of that is available to you. If you have a web farm, you could have it across multiple data centers. You could have it across multiple regions. So it's always available and up for the users. Some services are zone redundant by default. Think of a load balancer, for instance. When you deploy a load balancer, to maybe load balancing web front ends, that's already a zone redundant. So that's already built within a region and would run regardless if a data center went down or not for you. Storage by default is redundant. So you deploy an Azure storage account. You're going to get 3 copies of that within the same data center. That's a locally redundant storage. That's the minimum you're going to get. You can also configure that storage for its 3 copies to be across all the data centers within a region. So if, again, data center goes down, your storage account is still available to you. You have your 3 copies. You can replicate it geo-redundant. So if you want to protect against a regional failure, or you want, if you want to protect against a regional failure, you can take this storage that is locally replicated in your region and send it to another region where it will be replicated as well. So the likelihood of your storage becoming unavailable because of a storage failure is, I can't say non-existent, but it's getting really close there. You're more likely to lose access, internet access, than you will that the storage becomes unavailable to you. Compute services that become available out there. You have many, maybe is a better word, models of VMs that you might want to deploy, all pre-configured with certain numbers of CPUs and memory and storage and things like that, coming with pre-built templates for operating systems, whether you want Windows 2022 or 2019 or whatever, or you upload your own template and deploy, so you have your own operating system configurations being deployed. So there's a lot of flexibility in what kind of machines that you can quickly get out and running in this environment. You can configure them into scale sets, as I was mentioning earlier. These are collections of your VMs. Think of an IIS farm or web farm. This is very practical there, where it can scale up or scale out as needed, depending on the parameters that you've configured at a certain performance level. Add more machines running in the scale set or scale back some machines so you're not paying for machines running that are not being used. So those are an options when you go to deploy things. You want to deploy them in a scale set. As you, again, move up to platform as a service, as an example here, if you wanted to do SQL, for instance, you will still have the option of deploying SQL on a Windows server. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. But if you wanted to deploy that so that you're only managing SQL, here's where I can use the platform as a service, migrate my SQL database into the platform as a service. Here, I can do that. And now all you have to manage is SQL. Under the hood, you've defined how much processing power you want, but you don't have to manage those Windows servers, if you will. You're just managing your SQL. So now you're focusing on the application and the data that's pertinent to your business and not dealing with the infrastructure underneath of it. That's same true with web app services. So this would be your, you deploy a web app, you define through the app service plan what hardware runs underneath of that. So you get the performance that you want, what scale sets, how much CPU power, is it scaling up or scaling out, all of that. This is up under the hood and will manage for you. You manage your web app. So your developers can do their coding updates and just, push it out to the web systems for deployment. You are managing the app. You're not managing the infrastructure underneath. So you can keep your IT focus a little more tight on what's driving the business. So these options become available to you. You can first move up with a Windows server running SQL, and then migrate that SQL database into a platform as a service. So we could get you up to the cloud quickly as is, and then move you into platform as service as you're ready to start taking advantage of those services as well. It's there. You're not doing another migration necessarily to get you off of prem. It's there to use because you've already started putting yourself in the cloud. So when we start talking about migrations, there's always the question of, do you move as is or do you build new? Now, this will be true whether you're moving from on-prem to on-prem or on-prem to any cloud or cloud to cloud. You always have this question to ask. Am I just going to move my systems? Let's think of VMs right now. Am I going to move them as is because, their OS is already current and the application on it is already current. I have scripts that already know the server name and users know how to connect and everything is, I like it. I just want to change its location. we can do an as-is migration, or you can build new. When you move to the cloud or any new platform, this will be true when I talk about Hyper-V as well in a few minutes here. When you're ready to move platforms, this choice becomes available to you. This is your chance to clean up from the years of fixing that you've been doing all along and make sure your environment is efficient again. So migrations, though they can be a pain in the backside, offer you opportunities to get things straightened out and get yourself into technologies that are able to move you forward. So the Azure Migrate tool is what Azure offers you for the as-is migration. It's a free tool with some timeline. There's a little caveat there that supports moving servers and databases and web apps and just data itself. It works on the idea of first running an assessment of your system. So it says, okay, I'm going to go out and look at what you have, and it will put a small little appliance into your VMware world, and it will discover what you have, how resource intensive are they. And this discovery can run for a month or more if you want it, and it will learn the characteristics of your environment and offer you some suggestions as to, okay, if you're going to move to Azure, we're going to recommend VMs of models A, B, and C. And so you have some guidance as to what would be a good scaling, good resource fit in Azure, so you're not overpaying or underpaying, getting under utilization or under resources for things. So it first does an assessment, and then in the migration, it's a simple replicate and then migrate when you're ready. That replication gets it all synchronized. And when you're ready to migrate, you're not migrating the whole server. You're not having to be down for that whole time. You're only down for that final copy, if you will. And then it's ready to build the VM because all it's copying is the disks. And when you're ready to cut over, it builds a VM and attaches the disk to it, and you're ready to go. When I've done these before for, let's just say, medium-sized servers, 700 gig type stuff, small file shares type of thing, it was less than a half hour and the machine was up and running in Azure with that final cut and everything else. You also get the ability to test the migration. So you can do this cut over into a test network, make sure it comes up clean, systems are working. Then you can clean up that test by, just a button click to clean up the test and then go to do the migration. You now have some confidence that it's going to be successful because you've already done it once in the test network. Now there's caveats to testing because you're going to want to do it in an isolated fashion because these machines are, live someplace else as well. So you'll have to figure out how you're going to test in there, but that option is available to you. A lot of migration tools have that. But this is what's built in to move you as is up to Azure. So why consider Hyper-V? Right, so if the cloud really isn't for you right now, or can't be all of your world yet, and I think that's probably where many of us will stay. Something's going to have to stay on-prem probably for many people, but some things can go to the cloud. So we're going to probably end up in a hybrid world of some sort. But for your hypervisor, things to think about with the Hyper-V. Like I just mentioned, for the foreseeable future, most of us will probably need some on-premises resources. If you have Windows servers, you have Hyper-V. You may need to take a look at your licensing, like for data center licensing and things like that, but you're not installing a different operating system. You're working with what you're already familiar with. Largest market share after VMware. So you're not dealing with a off-brand hypervisor. You're dealing with a large company that has a hypervisor that supports many guests with some caveats, okay? VMware does a much better job with these non-Windows OSs, but Hyper-V can support them. Some caveats for each one of these that you'd have to check off. Do I use it for X, Y, or Z? If I do, I can't do this with Hyper-V. So we'd have to check that off to make sure we did that, that it would work for you. But here's the thing, Hyper-V is a core technology of Microsoft. Their Azure world is built on it. So if there's going to be any innovation, it's going to be continuing in Hyper-V because that's on Microsoft's platform. That's what they're running their platform on. This is not a side business to Microsoft. It has their attention, it has their focus, and innovation is continuing in this technology. So you can be secure that it is not going to be the forgotten child that doesn't get updated regularly when you need it to have new features. In fact, it's liable to be upgraded faster in this cloud world now than it was in the years prior, because now they need features in the cloud, and that will then come down to the Windows. Some examples of things they're putting into it now that are going to make it more VMware-like, if I can say it that way. It's starting to pick up some of those features that VMware used to show itself as a separator between all competitors. GPU partitions so that multiple systems can use the GPUs at the same times. Work group clusters that support live migration, so we don't need domains. Live migration between different generations of CPUs, again, closer to what VMware used to do. Stretch clusters, Hyper-V replicas across large spaces. Storage space direct to build your storage onto the system, and so much more. These things that VMware had are now becoming more and more and more a part of Hyper-V. So unless you're using something very unique to VMware, there's probably a Hyper-V feature that will give you either the same or close to feature compatibility with what you're doing now. Migration to Hyper-V will require hardware. So you're either going to A, set up new hardware, so this would happen at a hardware refresh, or you're just going to buy new. Or if you have spare capacity, we may be able to do a rolling migration, cleaning things off of one host, rebuilding that one host to be a one node cluster until we're ready to add the second node in, et cetera, et cetera. So we can kind of roll through if you have some extra capacity in your storage and with your compute. So that, like, for instance, if you had 3 hosts, if you can run on 2 hosts, we could use that third one and rebuild it as a Hyper-V, as long as we have storage to go with it. Some of the tools you have available to you. You have a standalone tool that will just be a virtual machine converter. You can do the Veeam backup and use the backup and replication software to backup and restore and convert it as it moves in. Microsoft's preferred method is to use the System Center Virtual Machine Manager, which is a management tool, but then can be used for conversion as well. And I have just a couple of quick screenshots on that. So in the VMM, you would identify your vCenter so it could go out and discover what you have. From there, you can now start adding your hosts and clusters into that, and then start selecting your VM. So this is right in the management tool that you would end up using to continue to manage your Hyper-V clusters. It has the capability built in to pull over a VMware VM into that environment for you. So you're not going out and buying yet another tool. One of the things that become, and these next couple slides are, these are interesting, something to consider, especially if you're thinking you might want to consider that hybrid world of cloud and Hyper-V. Microsoft is making it easier to manage your on-prem resources from Azure. There's a feature called Azure Arc, which provides the centralized management from the Azure portal. So you have some capabilities, some monitoring capabilities. I don't want to let you think that this is 100% management, but it's adding more and more features every day of what Azure can manage from your on-premises environment. So the Azure Arc can manage systems in other clouds. It can manage on-premises systems, including VMware and System Center, which is the Hyper-V. All right, so it can take the Azure, reach down and take a look at devices here and do some features. Let me just give you a couple examples. You can enable hot patching for your on-premises devices, which is an Azure Arc feature. So you can enable guest updating. from your Azure portal, targeting an on-premises system. You can enable monitoring, so we can pull up insights from what's happening on-prem into your Azure monitors, so you can manage, what does my resource utilization look like, who's logging into it, those kinds of status messages. So I can manage my Azure resources and my on-prem resources from the Azure portal. Auto manage, I can define policies so that when I go to build a machine on-prem, it can follow a policy and build the way I want it to build. So those are some of the things that Azure Arc goes, and we can do a whole webinar on that. I just wanted to say that, kind of just pointing out that these things become available to you in this hybrid environment. One other thing I wanted to point out, and this is not something you would do with your existing hardware. This requires a validated set of hardware. There's a service out there called Azure Local, which is using validated hardware to run a Hyper-V environment, and also using storage spaces for disk. A lot of this is in the hyper-converged style solutions, so that you could run virtual machines, virtual desktops, Kubernetes services, and things like that. The Azure Local is seen as a custom location in Azure. So when you say I want to deploy something and it says, okay, what location, you have your own on-premises Azure Local as a place you can choose. And because it's an Azure location, the Azure Migrate can use that to move VMs. So you can move VMs from your VMware into the Azure Local hardware solution on your premises, and it would be a managed Azure device. So not for everybody. We'd want to really talk about need for that. I just wanted to point out that this idea of hybrid management coming from Azure into your on-prem is something Microsoft is building on a regular basis. Another reason to consider at least a hybrid presence with the Azure cloud. So what have we talked about in these last couple minutes here? All right. Scott talked about Broadcom's pricing of VMware is causing many businesses to reconsider. He mentioned that it is a solid platform with many features that have become critical. But if you have to move away, you feel you need to move away because of pricing and things like that, one option is the Azure cloud. And you might want to be considering that for more than just hosting VMs, because all the options of platform as a service, integration with SaaS as a service, management from Azure, even to on-prem, all of these things become available to you. So you have many other benefits besides just running a VM. Hyper-V is a viable option with large market share for your on-premises environment. So if you need to retain everything on-prem or some on-prem, Hyper-V is a good solution because it has good vendor backing, and it's a technology that is not periphery to the vendor. Hyper-V, it does open, and there's the last couple slides, it does open up some options to integrate with Azure in the hybrid environment using things like Azure Arc for just getting management down to it, or Azure Local, where you're going to host your world on-prem being managed completely out of Azure because it is an Azure location. And that now brings us to, Chris, I guess you're going to want to step back in here to finish this up.
Thanks, Dave. So there are some training classes which are available for you, some discounts through our Learning Center. So, for some transitioning from VMware to Hyper-V, there's also other related courses on Azure. So those will be in your deck as well, so that you can see some of those discounts that are available. And since we're right at 1 o'clock, there are a couple questions, but we will reach out to you directly with answers, and we'll be able to address those there. We appreciate your time today. Just a reminder, you will get an evaluation if you can take just a moment for that. And of course, we will pull out of those completed evaluations for that Amazon $50 gift card to hopefully make this both a tasty webinar with your pizza, as well as a good one for shopping as well. Thank you so much. Thanks so much to Scott, as well as to Dave, and most of all to you for your time. We look forward to talking with you further, and enjoy your afternoon. Thank you.